Good evening. Welcome to Mr.SNACKS Soul Cafe. I am Alexandria, and I would love to bring on Soul Brother number 2, Hiroshi.
I like that, Soul Brother number 2. Anyway, welcome to Mr.SNACKS Soul Cafe. It's good to be here. I'm your host, Hiroshi, and we're at podcast number 8, no particular order. Today, or I'd say this evening, we're going to deal with doership, the illusion of doership.
Oh boy, this is going to be mind-blowing. To some.
Yeah. Where do we begin? Man is not the doer of any action. What a shock. Let's look deeply into this, because we all assume man is the doer. But that's an illusion. Illusion doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does exist, but not as the mind thinks it does. So, also the illusion appears real. It appears to be reality. Of course, man is the doer. I went to the store this morning. I went to sleep. I did the dishes. I washed the car. I made love to my wife. I decided to go to the store.
To Starbucks.
I'm watching TV, on and on. Right? But according to the understanding that has happened to me, no individual does any action. All action is a divine happening through that particular body-mind organism. You can say it's God's will, or the universe's will, or consciousness, or the source, or being. And everything that happens is the destiny of that body-mind organism. So if an action happens, it happens through this body-mind organism. You can call it God's will, like I said. And the consequences of that action goes with the action. So an action happens because it's meant to happen. Nothing happens unless it's meant to happen. And the consequences, whether they're good, labeled good, bad, or indifferent, are also life's will or God's will and the destiny of this organism. So it all comes right down to the bottom line. The bottom line. Is it my action? Is it my doing? Or is it not? So if it's not my action, it's not my doing, or anyone else's doing, then blame just drops away.
If man is the doer, would he ever do anything wrong?
Of course not. Pride drops away, or the guiltiness falls away, whatever the consequences. So wait a minute, Hiroshi. How about someone says something hurtful to you? It's really nasty to you. Or there's a divorce. Your spouse says, hey, I want a divorce. I want out of here. Very hurtful. It can be painful.
Unfortunately, hurt happens, and hurtful things are said. Sorry.
It's nothing personal, but we take everything personal. When the bad, so-called bad things happen, things that we don't like, then we object. But when good things happen, it's okay. You don't object if you won the lottery, or someone gave you a gift, or good things happened to you. But therefore, knowing that it is not someone's action which has hurt me, how can I ever strike back and hate that person or be mean to them? Because I know it's not personal. Life is a happening. You see, this can be both cool, comforting, but it also can be scary, like a horror movie. You see, that means knowing no action is my action, right? Knowing that it is not anybody else's action. It's not personal. Life is a happening. It's happening to really no one. But of course, you're going to think, well, I am someone. But that's the ego. It's a fiction. Mental fabrication. A creation of thought. It's just happening. There's no question of hatred for someone or envy or being jealous about someone. You see? And the understanding just has to happen to you. Pain and pleasure happens in life. Hurt happens, whether we like it or not. And this is very difficult to accept, to surrender to life as it is. You know, because when it's pleasurable, when things are going your way according to the ego, like on an airplane, when I get a middle seat, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, because it's uncomfortable. I don't like life at that moment. But when I get a first class seat or an aisle seat, all right, life is good. So it's based on conditions, right? Love is unconditional. And even Jesus, I referred to this in the past podcast. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. They're not doing it. So, fortunate or unfortunate, some people may be programmed, destined to have more pain, more suffering than someone else, or more pleasure than someone else. So the person with understanding, relatively speaking, accepts it as the destiny of the body, mind, organism. So Hiroshi, I mean, come on. You're saying that you're not responsible for your actions? Really? Can you really, I would say, could you really say all of your actions have been totally responsible? No, you can't. Why? Because a lot of it is just unconscious. We couldn't help it. You know? It's like being late for work or something. And you walk in and the boss says, you're late. Why are you late? Oh, I overslept. You didn't intentionally oversleep. You know, you didn't intentionally ignore the alarm clock. You just couldn't help it. You know? So whether this acceptance is there or not, whether you act responsibly or not, and to what extent you act responsibly is part of the conditioning. So if you're programmed, which we all are, the mind is conditioned mind at around age 3. We're programmed, conditioned. So if you're programmed to act in a very responsible way and you're not hurting anyone, that's cool. What you're doing is right, and but you're programmed to do that. But not all of us are programmed a certain way. I went through this whole thing with my brother. who's very, very organized, very precise, very clean, orderly, totally opposite. And I used to come down on myself. Why can't I be more like my brother? I mean, he vacuums his house and cleans his house 3 times a day. Never leaves dishes out. He uses paper plates and cups, and which I do now. you know. So a very clean, orderly guy. And me, I don't know what my conditioning or something, maybe because of all the touring I've done. You don't have to clean your room. You get the, housekeeping. You don't have to make your bed. Just leave it as it is. Messy. I don't know. But that's my conditioning. I can try. There's that trying, that effort that you think you're putting into it to be more organized, but it's just not happening. So there are people that are born to be responsible, people that are born to be irresponsible. And I'm not saying that this acceptance is going to make that person more responsible. We haven't even figured in, the DNA and the genes that come into play. There's this misunderstanding, misconception that a person with understanding, wisdom, will never get angry, will never get upset, will always be peaceful. It's not true. It all depends on the conditioning of the body-mind organism. Just because you see maybe me, some people say, wow, Hiroshi, you're so calm. I have moments of rage and ranting and anger, but I don't get ruffled that much. At least you won't see me that way. Very kind of a peaceful, non-confrontational type person. But it's not result of anything, except that's just the programming. Some people are very quiet and cool, like a cucumber. Others, they can just blow up. That's the natural programming of that person. And me too. So what about someone who does something illegal or commits a crime? How about that? Well, if the society and the law consider that action bad and illegal, that action, of course, will have consequences. You speed and the policeman pulls you over, you get a ticket. You do a robbery, you get thrown in jail. So this body will have to bear the consequences as part of the body's destiny. So an action has happened, and it may have either good or bad consequences. So it's all about this conditioning, this programming, the DNA, and the genes. And then there's this fresh conditioning which happens in this process. And the new and fresh conditioning is going to affect the existing conditioning. This understanding will affect how you perceive the world. What about prayer? Does prayer help? I don't know. Nothing wrong with prayer. Praying to God. People are praying that the world will change and become a better place. They've been doing it for centuries. Praying for one another. And change happens whether one prays or not. You notice? Because energy constantly changes and transforms. That's the nature of energy. So there has to be this deprogramming that happens, deconditioning. The new and fresh conditioning comes in. The understanding, which will transform.
Coffee break, okay? Time for a cup of coffee and a snack. Good evening, everyone. We will return in a few.
All right. Back into the rabbit hole. Alexandria, I'd like you to add something here to the conversation, okay? Go ahead.
We are back in the saddle, as a cowboy would say.
Yeah, Cowboy Roy would say you can put your boots in the oven, but it don't make them biscuits. Okay, carry on.
Good, Mr. Snacks. When you are in doubt, let your doggy do the thinking.
Man's best friend.
I might add that whatever state in which we currently find ourselves is the result of two factors: our genetic makeup at conception, as you mentioned, Hiroshi, and our present life conditioning. Every choice ever made by all humans and animals was determined by those two factors alone. Thus, free will, which we haven't dealt with as yet, is purely illusory, despite what most people believe.
Yes, we'll deal with free will in a later podcast. Yes, we are living in this dualistic universe. Can't get away from it. And we experience in this dualistic universe both the pleasure and pain. And we want the pleasure without the pain. Pain is uncomfortable.
Hiroshi, my dearest, I don't think our bodies can handle pleasure 24/7.
Suffering and pain are not synonymous. And the suffering arises when we just don't like what is, life as it is. And the suffering is due to a false sense of personal doership. That we think that we're the author of our deeds and our thoughts, that we're separate from everyone else, when everything is one energy. There's no separation and division, only in the mind.
The suffering is a result of not properly understanding what you have shared. Life is a series of happenings, and not caused by individuals. No living creature, including all humans, has a personal free will. There is only the universal divine will at play here, acting through everybody.
Yes, life as it is. Shakespeare described all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
Could you, by the way, explain the various forms of suffering that we experience in this life?
Yes, of course. There are five forms or five manifestations of this suffering, this psychological suffering that we experience. Guilt, blame. There's a saying, when you point your finger at someone, there are three fingers coming right back at you. Pride. And the worrying, the anxiety, and then also the regrets about the past, and expectations and hope for the future. You see, the mind is in the past and the future in the form of thoughts. So there's a trap right there. And this trap is a suffering trap. We want a different life than the life we've been given. We want the good parts. There's a resistance, a rejection of the bad parts. We want someone else's life, the good parts of it, rejecting the other part. Like we're picking and choosing. No, we're stuck with the life we've been given. Don't get into the mind trap. Get out of it. You get out of the mind. There's no peace of mind. It's an oxymoron. Peace is out of the mind. Don't give attention to your thoughts. That's the way out.
And the mind produces the thought, I, correct?
Yes.
The I is the doer, which is illusory. So the ego is a claimer.
Yes. It claims, I am doing this.
Another thing, if the belief is there that this podcast is heard by you, think again. The words are heard, and there is a sense of you. Both are sensed and experienced by something beyond.
Yeah.
You are this awareness, happening. That is my 2 cents, which is worth a nickel, I hope.
Hey, worth so much more than a nickel. Come on. Thank you. You're at a restaurant, music in the background, and you say, I'm going to order from the menu. You tell your guest, and the food comes. Oh, it looks delicious to me. I'm enjoying myself. I'm feeling good. I'm enjoying the dinner. Okay, let's look at it. Seeing the dinner is happening. There's no I involved. Tasting the food is happening. Feeling good is happening. Hearing the music in the background is happening. All these things are happening. The I is a phantom. And life is just happening to no one. And I know what you're thinking. We have to use words to communicate in this manifestation. Of course. I'm going to say I'm having dinner. I'm enjoying myself. I'm feeling sad or whatever. I'm going to use the word I. I'm going to use the word me and you. And look at a table, for example. You touch a table, it seems solid. You try to lift it, it seems heavy. And further investigation into the table, you break it down under an electron microscope. You find that the table is made of atoms, atomic particles. And these atoms are 99.99% space. There's no solidity. There's no weight in the atoms. It's empty space. Physicists have discovered that the apparent solidity of matter is an illusion created by our senses. This includes our own physical body. And this physical body is no more than a misperception of who you are. Buddhists have known this for over 2,500 years. The Heart Sutra, one of the best-known ancient Buddhist texts, in it says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So the essence of all things is emptiness. It's not easy to understand that the world is illusory. An illusion means it's not real, but only appears as if it's real. It sounds real, looks real. Makes you believe it's real, but it's not real. So we close with, man is not the doer. The illusion is that man is the doer. So, good night.
Wonderful. On that note, we end our podcast. Thanks for joining us. Good night.